broadcasting from the campus of Lynn Benton Community College. We are the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. I'm your host, Casey, and this is Closing the Gap.
Welcome back, Closing the Gap listeners. Today on the show, we have Regeneron Science Talent Search finalist Charlotte Rosario on the show, and we are going to be talking about their research, which is the brain structure and how it affects mood during puberty for trans youth. Welcome. Would you mind telling us about your research a little bit further, expanding on that and maybe some of your key findings?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially my project, as you mentioned, it's all about studying the intersection between gender, mental health, and brain volume. And so currently, changes, we understand from past research that changes during puberty can shape brain areas linked to depression and anxiety. But right now, researchers still don't fully understand why brain structure can differ between people with different gender identities. And we also, taking that one step further, don't understand how that could potentially impact mental health, because we do see dramatically different mental health outcomes between different groups, especially across gender identity, for instance, between cisgender youth versus transgender youth. And so in my research, I basically analyzed fMRI or MRI neuroimaging data from 20 transgender and 23 cisgender teens. And so they had their brains scanned. They also filled out clinical behavioral surveys on depression and anxiety. And when I assessed and analyzed the data, I found that, for one, transgender teens had differences in brain volume, especially in certain brain regions linked to mental health. And then I also found that they had differences in their mental health scores. And there was actually a significant overlap between the two. So the same regions, that they had differences in, such as the thalamus and hippocampus, were also, implicated in mental health. Impacting mental health. So it indicates that these regions might be potential correlates or factors into the distinct mental health outcomes that transgender youth face.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that, but first, I'm just so curious to hear about how you started studying this topic. What inspired you?
Yeah, for sure. So really what inspired me to be interested in learning more about mental health, specifically the mechanisms of depression, was actually my own family story. In middle school, I tragically actually lost my father to suicide. And it's taken many, many years to even be able to say that sentence out loud. But my journey of healing really from that loss initially was just Googling and researching, reading articles, reading science articles about depression and how it works. I wanted to understand, what happened, what was my dad going through, and then what are the implications on my own life as, someone who is 50%, has 50% of his genes. And so that introduced me to the mental health research space. And then in coming into high school, that's when I started to become aware of kind of the social landscape too, where my peers were facing mental health issues, disproportionate rates based on their identity. I saw that a lot of my friends who identified as transgender were struggling significantly more than my cisgender peers. And I even had one of my friends go through residential treatment for depression, and they're transgender. And so that really prompted me to want to specifically understand mental health for trans youth.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sorry that happened to you. So what are some of based on the research that you did and the findings that you found, what kind of scientific and social narratives are going to be influenced when we talk about and think about transgender youth and mental health?
For sure. Yeah, I appreciate the question. One of the biggest things is really just helping tailor, really helping improve mental health care for youth. These findings basically help researchers, help clinicians, help doctors better understand where to be looking when it comes to the brain, in terms of future research and just how to start designing mental health care clinical practices that are tailored to each individual young person based on their gender identity. And so hopefully through improving the mental health care, we can start to see better outcomes. We do have a mental health crisis in our world today. It's very apparent, and it's very much apparent for youth and for transgender youth. And so hope is really to tackle that mental health crisis. I also just think in general with given, the social political landscape today, it is so important that this research happens because for one, without this research, this means that youth are going to struggle without support. But also because there is just not much research done on transgender youth in the past in the first place. So this study really is offering kind of one of the first findings that can hopefully pave a longer path.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that this was such a groundbreaking area of study that you were doing. Based on what had been known before, if anything, were you able to find any similarities or differences based on your research and what had been out there previously, if anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of our findings did actually align with prior research done on cisgender youth. So, we found brain regions like the thalamus, the hippocampus that had significant brain structure differences that were correlated to mental health outcomes that we've seen time and time again in adult like studies and then also just cisgender youth studies. So that was actually great to see that consistency because it does indicate that, our findings might actually have, more legitimacy, right? And then from there, since we are working with a unique population, this study actually is one of the first studies to work with transgender youth in the US. And so seeing these findings now with this unique population is really exciting.
Totally, totally. Um, for the listeners that don't necessarily know this end of the show, we have speakers fill out a Q&A to kind of on board, so we get to know a little bit about them before they come on. And one of the things that you said in your Q&A that really had struck me was you don't have to belong to a specific identity to care about a community, and you expanded on that a little bit further. And you're doing this really important work that's needing to be done. And so I was wondering if you could give your thoughts behind that idea that you had submitted.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think really the big thing around, my response to that question was the idea that we all need to support each other when it comes to research. And so, I'm someone who doesn't identify as transgender, but I identify as a cisgender female. And even then, for people who look like me, have similar identities, there's already so much bias and stigma in the research field, especially since it's very much dominated by, people who may identify as white, male. And so it's so important that for more, minority groups or groups that are underrepresented in this research community, that they support each other. And so that's where I kind of see the importance of this research. Because I can imagine too, it is very difficult to research something that is directly about yourself. If you're a transgender youth who is actively struggling with mental health challenges, it can be triggering or just overall difficult to be staring at data and numbers that are about yourself, really. So that's where, again, having that allyship and having that support from all of these other groups of people is so important. So I always think about my friends, about the people I know and love, and I know the same thing applies when it comes to research. You can carry that love forward in how you do your research.
Yeah, totally. I think I remember you saying something about, telling stories and, get amplifying those stories to help people. And, there's a lot of people that aren't researchers out there, but a lot of people that have big hearts. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on how people could help amplify stories that aren't necessarily, they don't have the same skills in research and that kind of thing like you do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think what people can do is really, I mean, it's about being an active ally, and so someone who isn't just a passive bystander when stories are shared, because stories are everywhere. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has an identity, and everyone as a person. I feel like each person itself is a story, right? So it's important that people actively make an effort to support and amplify those underrepresented voices. And I think really what people can do is in conversations also that are very politicized and are difficult, stigmatized. I mean, right now, no question, it's very difficult to talk about even this topic of transgender youth. And so it's having that courage, that bravery to come forward and talk, even when silence might be the existing kind of status quo situation. So it's breaking that silence to talk.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I think we kind of buried the lead a little bit at the beginning of the show, and I didn't mention that you're high school students, which I think is incredible because you've also been able to have these opportunities where you work alongside undergrads and graduate students and professional research scientists. I would like to hear about that impact on you and how it's been able to influence your academic career and your researching career.
Yeah, definitely. It's been incredible. I mean, I want to shout out my lab at Stanford that I actually have done this research within, the Hong Lab with my PI or principal investigator, David, and then my mentor supervisor, Mel. They've been incredible and super supportive and just huge inspiration. Like, I think when it comes to research, it can sometimes feel pretty isolating, especially also if you are the only high schooler in the lab or you're remote, which I was mostly, and you're just like at home sitting in front of a computer, and I think it's so valuable when you could have a research experience that is grounded in human connection, people, getting to work with your mentors, supervisors, and even getting to understand and visualize the population that you're staring at in terms of numbers on your screen. Like to see that human connection is so important. So I think that has been one of the most meaningful parts of this research project is knowing that there's people behind the numbers that I'm analyzing and that are just in my lab community supporting this research.
Totally. Did you go into the experience like having or like confident in like research practices, or was that something that you had learned while at the lab?
That's a great question. I definitely learned pretty much everything from just once I joined the lab. Uh, I really actually, well, I joined the lab back in 10th grade, and then did this research over the course of 2 years. And so during those 2 years, it was just doing a bunch of trainings, reading documentation online of how to use like this uh, neuroimaging MRI data visualization software, like just learning as you go. But yeah, it was fun.
Cool, cool. Um, what kinds of classes or like extracurricular hobbies did you have that prepared you to do this kind of scientific research?
Yeah, definitely. So I've always loved coding and just STEM science. I mean, So in middle school, I was part of like a all girls FTC robotics team, and I was the programmer for the team. So that really introduced me and got me comfortable with this STEM space. I have a lot of female identifying friends who have had less positive experiences being in STEM communities because, again, it can be very much male dominated. So I'm very grateful for that experience because I think it helped me fall in love with science and technology at an early age, and that helped me going into high school. Just really want to dive into a bunch of things through projects. Very much just did a lot of project based things. So built apps and different tools, just tinkering with code, and that really opened up my eyes to when I did have a lot of these questions come high school about depression, human behavior, psychology. I was able to then just cross apply those tools, those coding tools and such into the research.
Could you expand on what you mean by cross applying the coding tools to your scientific research?
Yeah, definitely. So, in the type of research that I did for this project, it's working with lots of data. And so, with the MRI neuroimaging data and then also the clinical behavioral data, a lot of it is data analysis, data processing. And so, I was often using Python programs that I was writing, and also working with this software visualization tool called FreeSurfer, which you have to kind of work with via different types of like commands, programming commands in terminal, where you like are basically just trying to extract different pieces of data from this very specific type of data, which is MRI data, which essentially is like brain scans, very high resolution. And so it was really helpful to just have experience working with various just programming languages or honestly on online tools, whatnot, just so that with this new type of data that I was now working with, I could understand how to work with it better.
Cool. That's awesome. So you had all these really cool STEM experiences, and now you just had finished up the Regeneron Science Talent Search as a finalist. I would love to hear about your experience with it.
Yeah, I miss it so much. I miss the people already. It's been a few months since I last saw a lot of them because our competition was back in early March, I believe. But yeah, this experience was incredible, and I think the best part of it all was the people. My fellow finalists, there were 40 of us there, just genuinely, I mean, of course, super, super smart people. I mean, during our like breaks and free times, we'd be like showing each other cool problems. And there was a whiteboard in our lounge area, so people would always just like scribble up like, different types of math problems or puzzles. But then also just like the capacity of for kindness that everyone had. I mentioned it a lot during my trip there to people, but I feel like I started to observe a very strong correlation between I feel like just love for science and then kindness. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the link between the two? And I feel like it's this idea that like a lot of those people there, they understand the power of kindness, maybe even at a scientific level of how good it is to be a good person. So everyone there was just so kind, and I think that's what I appreciated the most was, just, yeah, how supportive everyone was, and it was so much fun.
That sounds great. So it sounds like you were at a competition, but you were in community rather than competition with everybody else. It sounds like a really great experience for a young female to be like in this space with other young women and young men and feeling support. Because you were mentioning earlier about how a lot of your friends that are also in STEM didn't have like a great intro to it like you had with your all female robotics team. Were you able to like hang out and get to know each other and do some networking while you were there, or was it more of just kind of focused on the actual competition?
Yeah, so we were there for I would say a week, and so half of it was judging interviews. And we like to joke that made us actually trauma bond because during the in between time between the interviews, we would be just like comforting each other or ranting. So that was really fun. And then a good other half was filled with different types of activities. Um, we went to actually visit like our representatives, senators, with some fellow finalists. We got to go to like basically different places like Janelia Research Lab, which is like this huge complex, and also just like have fun at all our meals, dinners, different talks, and um, we had a finalist lounge where, like I said, we would have a whiteboard in there, but we also had a TV and a karaoke machine. So we did karaoke. We watched Love Is Blind, like it everything and anything. And it was a lot of fun.
That sounds so fantastic. So you were doing like presentations and stuff. Were you able to use any like um public speaking sorts of skills that you would like learn in school, or was this kind of like on the fly? This is the practice, learning how to present, or did you come in seasoned?
Yeah, I've done in the past presentations. I actually have never done an in-person science fair before.
Oh, cool.
So this was actually quite new. I know a lot of other kids there were seasoned science fair people. Some were even like ISEF winners in the past. So that was definitely something I had to get used to. But luckily, um, I've done various like talks and presentations and in the past, and so I was able to use those public speaking skills when I was presenting my research.
So how did you learn about the competition? Was it something that you had like been like, this is a goal I want to achieve it, or did someone present it as an idea?
Funny enough, my mentor or my lab head, David, he actually applied. I believe that's what he told me, but he said he applied actually to Regeneron Science Talent Search back when he was a high schooler. So many years ago. Not calling him out as old, but like just he's an adult. So when he was a high schooler, um, and he was the one that actually introduced me to the competition and said, "Hey, you should apply." I'd already been doing my research project in his lab up until that point, and so it just made logical sense to give it a try, fill out an application.
So, do you plan to like continue with this research as you like go on in your career, or what's next?
For sure, yeah. I definitely want to continue research. I actually am heading to Stanford next year, so I'm able for college. So I'll be able to actually,
Congrats.
if I even want to, thank you. If I want to, I can continue working in the lab. And then I also know that, Stanford has a lot of other labs too that are very good at what they do in the mental health space. So I'm interested in exploring those as well. But I think really, like I said, this research on transgender youth is so important because there's just not enough of it. And so, the hope is really to keep this going. And also, the research project that I did is part of a larger longitudinal study within the lab in general. And so their larger kind of longitudinal study paper should hopefully probably be coming out once they finalize all the data that they're getting in the next few years. So that's going to be a more long term thing too.
Wow, that's great. That's super exciting to look forward to.
Yeah.
So, if someone's interested in learning more about your work or what you're up to, do you have any like websites or like a LinkedIn or anything you'd like to promote?
For sure, yeah. So people definitely connect with me on LinkedIn if you're interested. I try to keep things updated on there. If you want to learn more about Regeneron and read about my specific project, there is a project video and then also my poster board listed on the Regeneron website if you go to 2025 finalists. And then yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm getting onto Twitter. But yeah, you can find me online, find my contact via socials there, and always happy to connect with anyone who wants to chat.
Cool. Yeah, and we will link all of Charlotte's stuff in the episode page for anyone that's interested in seeing the research. But yes, thank you so much for your time and this chat. It was really fascinating to hear about the work that you've been able to do.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Casey.
Thanks for listening to Closing the Gap. This podcast is a production of the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. If you would like to be part of the conversation, fill out our interest form at midvalleystem.org/closingthegap. If you like the show, follow us on Spotify to stay up to date with the newest episodes. And for STEM news in the Mid-Willamette Valley, follow the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.